Hey, and welcome to another episode of ChangeTalks. Today I'm having a conversation with Robert Holden, and Robert is known for his work on happiness. He is a successful coach and has worked with a number of high-level companies such as Dove and Virgin. Robert has also authored a number of books, including Shift Happens, Be Happy, and Success Intelligence. In this interview, look forward to discovering how you can be happier and coach others to be happier.
Anyway, all good?
Yes, very good, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for doing this interview. I imagine that you're a very busy person, so I appreciate that you've taken the time to do this interview.
Well, I like to do them. It's but yeah, you've had to have been patient too, and I'm sorry about that. But I just tend to. You have to divide a fine line between doing what you do and talking about what you do, and and I'm in a sort of a curious position in that I could talk about what I do a lot with the interview requests I get. So what I try to do is just do like literally one or two a week. So I can always get around to them in the end, but it's I appreciate you being patient too.
It's nice that you get that many requests. I imagine one or two a week.
Well, we probably get, quite honestly, we probably get 3 or 4 a day to do exactly what we're going to do now. So, as well, we just, it's just, I think it's just the fantastic, advent of technology now. There are so many radio stations, there's so many creative ways of spreading your message and exploring your message, isn't there? It's amazing.
There's a lot of stuff going on. And one of the first questions I was having is simply, what was your motivation for becoming a coach?
Well, Aaron, that I didn't really become a coach as such. I mean, that wouldn't have been the starting point for me in my journey. So, Aaron, just so I'm clear, are we going to go straight into a record, or what are we going to do?
Yeah. I basically record it, and then outside of the interview, I basically do like an audio introduction that I then put together. And so when someone's listening to it, it just flows right through.
Fantastic. And how long are we going to go for as well? Let's just get our times in place.
Typically, it's around about a half an hour to 40 minutes.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Okay. All right. So you fire away when you want to.
Yeah, so literally the first question was, I know you started quite early in your mid-20s in personal development. So when was it that you started becoming a coach?
Well, I think that becoming a coach, there was a development to that. I mean, firstly, I studied psychology and philosophy, and I enjoyed those studies enormously. I didn't want to be a psychologist as such. I didn't continue my training to become a psychologist. I became more interested actually in psychotherapy.
Right.
And so I really became interested in that, and I studied counselling and took qualifications in counselling and then also in psychotherapy. Continued with the work into philosophy as well, and actually started doing a lot of group work, Aaron. So I was lucky enough to set up a clinic on the National Health Service called Stress Busters when I was about 24, I think. Coaching came later, but coaching appealed to me because I felt that it was, frankly, it was very practical, and I felt that coaching really was something that was a good discipline for me to explore, because it really seemed to be saying, well, look, we can actually make breakthroughs quickly if we're practical about what it is we're looking at. And I think I really appreciated that. And so, I wouldn't describe myself today really as a coach. At the same time, I do coaching. That is part of my work. And I have a small caseload. I see 4 or 5 people at a time normally for around about 10 sessions at a time.
Okay.
But I think, like many people, I was interested in how coaching just appeared in the world, from sport, I suppose, into business, and then from business into life coaching.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm just very, very pleased to be exploring it along with many other people too.
So you spend most of your time just teaching now and writing?
My days are, there's no such thing as a normal week, Aaron, which is quite nice most of the time. Every now and then it would be nice to have a normal week.
It makes it exciting.
But I quite like the balance. I like coaching, and I do maybe 2 or 3 coaching sessions a week. I do a lot of talks, keynotes in particular, master classes in corporations, in organizations. I also do a lot of work with my publisher now, Hay House.
Okay.
You know, I give talks. I go over to the States about once every 6 weeks to give a talk, mostly at an I Can Do It conference over in the States.
Wow.
And then, of course, then there is the writing and the researching as well. I think right now I'm getting ready to write a new book, so everything changes again. But I like the balance of being able to think and explore, to write and express myself, to give the talks, and also do the one-to-one coaching. And I should say, on top of that, of course, then we have a really thriving and expressive public program where we are giving workshops. I've just come back from New York where I did a 5-day coaching happiness program.
Nice.
We have a 5-day coaching success program. We have a series of workshops on love as well, called Lovability. So, you know, I like the chance, Aaron, to use all of the mediums to explore the universal messages and the universal principles that have captivated me and enthralled me and made a difference in my life.
Okay, so what has it been about your experiences that led you to focus on this issue of authenticity and happiness?
Well, the authenticity question is there, I suppose, right from the beginning. When you get involved in a spiritual path, one of the first questions you're going to get asked in pretty much any spiritual tradition is, who are you?
Right.
And that tends to be pretty problematic because, you know, the first answer is, I haven't a clue. And that requires some thinking about. And I think the spiritual path in many ways is really a chance for us to understand what authenticity is. You know, the way I see it is we have 2 selves. One self is the unconditioned self, the original self, what the Buddhists would call the original face, before you became identified with a body, what the Catholics would call the original blessing.
Right.
You know, this sense of a self that was beautifully made, that is whole and complete in every way. Many traditions believe in this idea and believe in this self that is an unconditioned self. We then have a learned self, and this learned self is what the Greeks would have called the persona, or Freud would have called the ego, or Western psychologists would have called it the self-image or self-concept. And I think that authenticity is really about being able to almost see through the persona, the image you've got of yourself, to be able to contact the real substance of your essence. I mean, that's pretty deep, isn't it? But I think that's where authenticity begins. And so in a way, authenticity starts really with trying to meet yourself as you are without the conditioning.
Right. Okay. And when you work with clients, is this the common things that come up, the issue of happiness and authenticity? Do you find?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that, frankly, it's very hard to be successful and inauthentic. You may appear to be successful, but you won't feel the success if you're not being true to yourself. Similarly with happiness, you know, try being happy and inauthentic. I just don't think it would really ever work. Authenticity is also, I think, a great key to happiness and a great key to success. So a lot of my work really is about helping people to understand who they really are, understand what gives them energy. I mean, why do we really wake up? Why do we really get out of bed every day? What is it that truly energizes us? What is it that makes our heart sing, so to speak? What is it we believe in? What is it that inspires us? You know, when we can begin to answer these questions, that I think gives us an idea of who we really are. And the clearer we get on who we really are, then I think we're better equipped to face the world.
Okay, so when you're working with people more on like an executive level, in corporations and things, how open are they to seeing that link between being authentic and success in their work? Because I imagine if for example, a company is underperforming, their focus would be more on, you know, getting the job done and creating that profit. And do they have an openness when you work with them?
Well, all of the people that have asked me to work with them have that openness.
Okay.
But I think, you know, also, Aaron, you know, that's because, you know, the people that I'm meeting, they're coming to me in the first place.
So they have an idea about what you're about. And
yeah, I mean, okay. Aaron, if you and I were to try and sell authenticity to the world, you know, I'm sure if we were to drop a load of flyers through the post box, a lot of them wouldn't be looked at. But you know, this is a different situation where people are actually coming to me, coming to the Happiness Project, coming to Success Intelligence, coming to you. You know, it's a bit different. I would say though that the people who come to see me really understand that authenticity is absolutely key, particularly in this day and age where I think everybody, you know, there's so much marketing on the planet right now. I mean, the world is full of marketeers, and many of them are marketing products and ideas that they don't use and they don't believe in. So, you know, I think we're on the lookout for something that feels more real and more true, and so whenever we get even the slightest sign of authenticity, I think it interests a lot of us these days. I was very lucky to play a part in the brand called Dove. I was the coach to the last two presidents of Dove, and Dove, you know, was a brand that really made a move from being a cosmetic company to a real beauty campaign. And that was all to do with authenticity. The president, Silvia Lagnado, made a statement, a public statement, that, you know, she wanted to only create products that the women in her life would want to use and would enjoy using. And she wanted to create a brand that essentially was authentic. And wasn't just trying to generate profit. And I think, you know, that became a great story all around the world. And, you know, as I say, I was thrilled to play some part in that, you know, a small part, but nonetheless, you know, a good part in looking at this idea that authenticity can be a key to success.
Absolutely. And, you know, you've appeared in your career a lot in the media, whether it's in your documentaries on the BBC or as a contributor to Oprah.com. So what, for coaches that want to get more media presence, what would you recommend as some of the steps that they would do to be able to, you know, get out there and get their be more visible in order to get those gigs?
Aaron, I think that's a great question. I think that coaching, should be an expression of who we are. Obviously, it's appropriate and useful to call ourselves a coach, but I would say dig deeper than that in yourself if you can. The coaching is an expression of what you do, but there's more to you than that. And I think the thing is to find something in you where you understand your teaching, you understand your message, you think carefully about what is it I really want to learn in this lifetime. What is the sole promise I've made to myself that I'm absolutely going to learn X, Y, and Z this time. You know, for me, I mean, it was, you know, I learned about happiness and success as much as anything because, you know, that's what I was confused about. You know, my mother was depressed for a lot of her life and for a lot of my childhood. That got me thinking about happiness. My father was alcoholic and lived homeless for the last 10 years of his life. That absolutely got me thinking about success. So in a sense, you know, personally what I did was I committed to my own healing and to my own enlightenment, so to speak. I wanted to become more enlightened about these subjects, and then coaching became an extension of that, if you see what I mean. So first and foremost, I would say to everybody, think about the art of what it is you're doing, the real purpose of what you're doing. Let coaching be an expression of that. But fundamentally, the more authentic you are, the more you will stand out as you. And just to give, one key distinction here, Aaron, a lot of people try very hard to be unique. And quite honestly, I think trying to be unique tends to leave us feeling neurotic. Because when you're trying to be unique, you're really trying to get something. You're trying to make an impression, but you're trying to get something. When you're trying to be authentic, you're thinking much more about who you're being and what it is you're giving. And I think if you take care of the being and the giving, the receiving can go to a whole other level. So, and I would also give this advice, by the way, to writers as well. If you're writing a book, don't try and write a unique book. Write an authentic book. It will be unique. Here's the thing. The more authentic you are, the more unique you're going to sound anyway. Okay. But authenticity is a much more wholesome aspiration than uniqueness. And if you go for that, I think it just helps to take care of things. On that note, Aaron, I'd also just say that I think the best form of marketing on the planet is an open heart. And that means allowing yourself to be guided, allowing yourself to really contemplate when an offer comes in, like, what's a yes here? What's a yes, and actually what's a no here? And try your best not to be bought by the world. Try not to worry too much about the money. It's important that you do. That is very important. But in particular, always just remember that an open heart, as I say, really is the best form of marketing on the planet. I've been amazed how often things have worked out for me, Aaron. I mean, just to give one example, I remember I was running a 3-day program once, and I got an offer to give a talk, an after-dinner talk for no money on the second evening of this 3-day program. Right. And as far as I was concerned, Aaron, it was an absolute no. So I was about to write the email saying, thank you, but no. And I couldn't write the email. And eventually I asked Holly, my wife, just to come and take a look at the email. And I just said, look, I'm having trouble here because I'm trying to write no, but it feels like a yes. And I really don't like the thought of doing a yes, not in the middle of a 3-day program. Well, Holly looked at the email and she said, it's a yes, you've got to do it. And I did do it. I went and I gave the after-dinner talk. I don't like doing after-dinner talks, Aaron, because I don't eat much beforehand. I don't drink anything. It's not pleasurable for me. But I did it. And quite honestly, I mean, 2 things happened, really. The first one was that I made a friend who supports the same football team as me. And he has a box at the ground and occasionally invites me to games, which is, for me, a little bit like a religious experience. I can't believe that could have ever happened. The other thing that happened is that I did end up with a contract, not just for me, but for the team, which has now been running for about 5 years, and it's been one of the most creative contracts that I've ever had with one of the, largest law firms in the world. It's been fascinating. It's taken me all over the world. Who would have known, Aaron? Who would have known? But you just have to answer that yes and be very clear about what that yes is and let it guide you. And that's why I would always say go back to authenticity first and purpose, and then let your coaching be an expression of that.
And if in doubt, ask the wife.
Always, Aaron. That's probably the most important bit of all. Absolutely right.
Good. And I imagine that, like, part of the authenticity and being real is being aware, being open about the setbacks that have occurred. The times when it hasn't quite worked out for you. And I was wondering what you found to be useful when you've experienced like setbacks in the past, things that didn't quite go the way that you hoped they would.
Do you mean setbacks in coaching or just in general?
What setbacks in the way that your business wanted to go, or in coaching? Just basically the things that you kind of hoped it went a different way.
Absolutely, Aaron. I mean, I wish I could say to you that I haven't had an experience of that. Can we move on to the next question? But there have been lots of difficult times. Actually, in my book Success Intelligence, I write. There's a chapter in there called the failure policy, and this is the idea that actually, in order to be successful, you have to have a good failure policy. If you are scared of failure, you probably won't be as successful as you could be. If you are ashamed of failure, you will probably be defensive and will miss the opportunity to learn. So, it's something that I take very seriously and have written about personally. So, and the principle being, in order to be successful, you have to have a very healthy relationship to failure. Frankly, for me, when things don't go too well, it's a process. The first part of the process is I don't feel good. I don't feel great about what's happened, not at all. And I probably want to give up and and do everything else that's entirely inappropriate, and I couldn't possibly repeat on this interview. That's just an incredibly human response. That takes a little while to blow over, and usually what I do to help it blow over, quite honestly, is prayer. And I think of prayer just as me accessing my true self, if you like. Now, after that, I might, if I'm feeling particularly sane, I might just do something like, well, what's a good way to handle this situation and what's a bad way to handle this situation? Let's just get it down on paper. Let's look at what's happened here. And just even doing that, just recognizing what's the good way, what's the bad way, or writing down a few good ways and a few bad ways, begins to give me a bit of a perspective. That said, I mean, Aaron, the other thing for me, which is incredibly important, is I don't work alone. I have a team. Ben Renshaw is one of the co-directors. Avril Carson is a co-director. Both of them, fantastic people, first and foremost. And I can always go to them. I can go to Ian Lynch, who's my business manager, and have a conversation with him. Okay. My agent, Jennifer Rudolph Walsh, if I needed to, I could do that. And, of course, Holly, So that's all part of it as well, Aaron. So, in short, it's a process. And the way I feel in the beginning isn't that great. But with a little bit of help, I usually, it galvanizes you and you try and remember what's real.
Okay, so it's important to have a team around you when these things happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, that's one of the benefits of coaching, I suppose, is that the moment you go and see a coach, now you've got a team. Yes. If you didn't think you had before, you have. And in fact, I think one of the biggest blocks to success and happiness is that we try to do life on our own too much. We suffer from what I call dysfunctional independence, and frankly, whenever we're open to help, I think that has to be a good thing.
And one of your courses that you do is coaching happiness. And what are some of the big realizations that participants get when doing that particular course?
Well, coaching happiness is a 5-day program. And it's basically a chance to look at the key principles and exercises that we do on the 8-week happiness program, which is the signature course of the Happiness Project.
Okay.
This is a program that we've been running since 1994, and this 8-week program was the basis for the BBC documentary that was done by QED. It's what got us onto Oprah and other things. The 5-day program then attracts a lot of coaches, but also, we've just done a course. I've just come back 2 days ago from New York, where we did a 5-day coaching happiness course, and we had lots of coaches on that program, psychologists, psychotherapists, teachers, health professionals of other descriptions, and they're interested in just a deep dive into the program and what it is we are trying to do. It's we do 18 modules over 5 days, so there's a lot to the program, and we basically, each module is based fundamentally on a blend of my thinking, the exercises we use on the 8-week program, the current research and how that backs up what it is I'm trying to do, that type of thing. There's a real blend to everything we're doing on that program. It's we run it usually just once a year. It's a joy to do it. Most of the programs I do, I only run once a year. That's frankly just to keep it fresh. Okay. I mean, more than anything else.
Are you finding a lot more research coming into play now with happiness? Because I imagine back in the 90s, positive psychology was still really new then. Are you finding more and more nowadays that more research into the area of happiness and the components around it are starting to come up?
It was a lonely business in the beginning, Aaron, running a happiness project.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it really was. 1992 we began properly, and it was a very, I look back and, well, our mission statement was, the first one anyway, was called Talk Happiness. Very simple mission statement, Talk Happiness. And really the thinking behind that was I just wanted to start a conversation about happiness. Frankly, Aaron, I didn't really know anything about happiness at the time. All I knew was that in all of my work, we were looking at the causes of unhappiness, right, but we weren't exploring what the essence of happiness is.
Okay.
And so it was the goal was to talk about happiness, and it's fantastic really to think that now there are many conversations about happiness. You mentioned positive psychology. That really was birthed in 1999. When Martin Seligman was the president of the American Psychology Association. Things have spread so quickly since then, and I'm thrilled about that. It was always the goal of our work that we could just support conversations on happiness, and I think the conversations are alive and well now, and even at a government level where even the governments are beginning to understand that we can't just measure our progress by economics. Frankly, when we measure everything by economics, we end up with lots of problems with economics, which is what we're experiencing right now. We do need to be able to factor in other ways to measure our growth as individuals, as nations, as a planet. And it makes absolute sense that we should factor in happiness in the same way that organizations are now beginning to understand that, you can't have consistent success without a sense of well-being in the organization. It just can't happen. Happiness is more than just a good feeling. It's an enabler. It's what enables us to be successful. That's pretty fascinating, because for many of us, Aaron, when we were brought up to believe that success will make us happy.
Yeah.
But what the research is showing now, especially the longitudinal research where we're able to follow people for up to 24 years, we're finding that the happier people are also the most successful people. They seem to attract a different quality of experience in their life. And so therefore, happiness is credited with being a great enabler as well.
Okay. And what's the overall message in the newer book that you've got in Shift Happens?
Well, Shift Happens actually is the most recently republished book. It was a book actually that I wrote in 1999.
Okay.
And it's I love this book. It's a book that I wrote actually because my one-to-one waiting list had just gone over 100 people.
Wow.
And I realized that, obviously I was never going to get around to seeing these people, but what I thought I would do is write a book about the some of the more common blocks I find, blocks to happiness, to success, to abundance, to love. And I just made a point of trying to distill what I knew about those blocks to write them in a very brief way. There's 50 chapters of about 750 to 1,000 words each. And I have to say, you know, of all the books I've written, it's one of the ones I really love the most because it's so practical. It's the book that can go in your handbag or your briefcase or sit on your bedside table, and you can dip into it. It's a book actually that a lot of coaches like because they can give it as a supplementary reading to the program they're offering,
right?
And it just works somehow. But I love Shift Happens. Shift Happens fundamentally. The essential shift that I'm addressing in the book is really about identity. I was trained to help people change their thinking, and initially, talking about failure, I failed all the time. I couldn't help people change their thinking. I could help them to change their thinking a little bit for a little while,
right?
But fundamentally, the old thoughts kept coming back. And I wasn't able really to be at all effective until I realized that you don't really change psychology with psychology. Fundamentally, our psychology is governed by our identity. It's who I think I am that governs my psychology. In other words, it governs the thoughts that I identify with. And when I change my mind about myself, that automatically changes my thinking.
Okay.
So that's been one of the biggest shifts of my work. Another really big shift that we look at in Shift Happens is the difference between self-improvement and self-acceptance. There's a principle in Shift Happens which is that no amount of self-improvement can make up for any lack of self-acceptance. And fundamentally, Shift Happens is a book about trying to give up self-improvement. I think self-improvement is really a covert form of self-attack. And actually, when you accept yourself and you have an experience of accepting yourself, the miracle is that actually your life starts to improve.
Okay. But when you self-accept, it's obviously still possible to get better. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole point. It's because we don't accept ourselves that life's so damn difficult. And then we think we need to do a self-improvement program, so we do a self-improvement program, but the tragedy is we're trying to improve upon a self that we've never really met. Self-improvement is working at the level of the ego, of the self-image. The self-image and the ego, the same thing, they're basically under construction. We're always trying to build them up.
Okay.
Whilst at the same time, the self-image is usually trying to tear itself down, in our bad moments. Whereas our essence, that's already okay. And that's what self-acceptance is about. Self-acceptance is about being able to see yourself without judgment, which, by the way, for many people is a revelation. A lot of people have not had the experience of seeing who they are without judging themselves. But when we do, and when we begin to accept ourselves, and the first idea of self-acceptance is fundamentally that maybe there's actually nothing wrong with the essence of who we are. Maybe there's nothing blocking us other than our image of ourselves. When you get to that point and you start to take self-acceptance seriously, then absolutely, to your point, Aaron, your whole life improves. And that's the miracle. That's the great thing. So it's like a sort of a paradox. You try self-improvement and you always feel like there's so much more to do. You have an experience of self-acceptance and amazingly, life starts opening up for you. Why is that? Because you're not rejecting yourself anymore. You're not negating yourself anymore. You're not trying to create a version of yourself that everybody else would like. Because again, how can you be authentic if you don't accept yourself? You can't. So you have to create what Eric Fromm calls the commercial personality. But everybody knows what a commercial personality is these days. It doesn't work well for us. So that's why we have to be willing to let go of the commercial personality and go for the authentic self again. But we can't do that unless we're willing to accept ourselves. And that means not just accepting ourselves logically and rationally, but literally, spiritually. It's a meditation, you know. It's to be able to see ourselves without judgment, see who we really are. There's an amazing prayer by Macrina Whitaker. It's my favorite prayer. I wrote about it in Happiness Now. And the prayer is, "Dear God, show me the truth about myself, no matter how beautiful it is." Now that is real prayer.
Yeah.
And that also, by the way, is a great coaching session.
Absolutely. And that's what you've just said there is really good. And we are nearing the end of the interview now, but I was just wondering what your aspirations for the future are. You mentioned earlier that you're writing a new book, and you're just wondering what the kind of the future holds for you, Robert.
Aaron, it's a good question. Oh, the future. My goodness. Do you know, first and foremost, it's like, you know, the thing that makes the most sense for me is spirituality. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I just say to God every day, look, would you please be in charge of my career? Because, you know, if I try to do it myself, I know I'll screw up. But also, if I try to do it myself, you know, I'll aim low. I really will. Even if I'm saying it's big, I'll aim low. So what I like to do is I just like to be able to say, dear God, you know where I am. If I can be of any assistance anywhere, you know, please feel free to use me. You know, and I think that's a great place to start. Also, you know, dear God, if there's something I need to heal, which there always is, there's something for me to heal, you know, please show me what that is. Sometimes, by the way, that means God sends me a client, you know, who actually helps me to heal, because together we face an issue which is incredibly current for me as well. Right now, what's really exciting me, though, you know, we've been running a number of workshops on love in recent times.
Yeah.
And so the new book, which is I've just had accepted, so I'm going to be starting writing that now and into next year. That's a book about love, and in particular how to love and be loved. So I'm really going to be doing an inquiry into the sort of the relationship between feeling lovable and the experience of our life. You know, when we feel lovable, it's as if anything's possible, and we let go of all the things that could possibly limit us. When we don't feel lovable, we compensate in all sorts of ways, like trying to be successful, trying to be positive, you know, all the stuff that's just all too familiar to all of us. But this idea of feeling lovable and knowing that that's a great starting point for a truly creative life, and a happy one as well, is just too good an inquiry for me to turn down. So that's what I'm really looking at the moment, Aaron.
Brilliant. That sounds really good. And I really thank you for the interview that you've had. You've had some really good answers, and I know a lot of people will get some good feedback from this interview. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, Aaron. Thank you.
Okay, and good luck with your new book.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, see you later.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.